This is Greg Pass with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today's date is July the 28th, 2022, and I have the pleasure to sit down today with Rich McAdams. I am in Woodbridge, Virginia, and I'm speaking with Rich through the magic of a Zoom meeting. Rich, can you tell us where you're at right now?
I am just outside of Huntsville, Alabama.
Outstanding. Rich, can you tell us what your full name is and where you were born?
The full name is Willis Richard McAdams Jr. I was born in Nuremberg, Germany, on my dad's second tour in Germany.
So leading into that, obviously you do have some veterans in your family. Tell us a little bit about your dad and if you had any other military veterans in your family.
Sure. My dad was a career soldier, retired as a senior NCO, did two combat tours in Vietnam and one in Korea. He retired in 1970 when he was headed to Vietnam for the last time. My mom and us kids headed back to what they called the old home place. They had bought an old family home that they were going to restore. And so I tell people I'm technically an Army brat. And the reason I say technically is Dad retired when I was 6. So I got to go to the same school, 1st through 12th grade, whereas my oldest sister went to 9 schools in that time in her education. So I only remember Fort Rucker and then being, Dad being out of the Army.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of, as far as others, you have to go back to the Civil War to find another family member. But my dad was career Army. Yeah.
So was your dad influential in your decision to be commissioned in the United States Army?
He, not as much as you would think. He was incredibly proud that I chose to try to go to West Point. But it was not a pressure thing. I didn't even realize that the Army-Navy game was attached to, colleges until probably the 11th grade. I thought it was like, hey, Sergeant so-and-so, you played football, right? Okay, come on, Ensign so-and-so, come on, we're going to play Army, and then I found out, oh, there's schools attached to this and they're really good, they're really high caliber education and it's poor. So when I applied and was very blessed to get an appointment, and and it went from there.
So tell us a little about your time at West Point.
I helped do some recruiting after I graduated, and I was very honest with all those kids. I told them I never regretted being from West Point. There was a lot of times when I was there that I regretted being at West Point, especially the first year. It's tough, but in some ways it's easier than like an Alabama or Auburn because there are no distractions compared to a public university. You got to be in your room, especially as a plebe. You got to be in your room by 7:30 and lights off by 10:30, except for your desk light. And then, at 11:30, I think, you've got to be your desk light off. And so there's nothing you really can do except study, and very structured. But my best friends to this day are West Point classmates. And it was that, and my time in the Army was extremely formative. I would not trade anything in the world for the experience of going to West Point and serving in the Army as a commissioned officer. It was fantastic.
So you mentioned Army Navy, and being a big Army Navy fan myself, what's it like to be attending West Point and go to your first Army Navy game? What's that like?
It was amazing. It's different. I grew up in Alabama, a huge Alabama fan, and you've got that Alabama-Auburn rivalry and the Iron Bowl but that one's different. That one, the teams hate each other all year. And Army Navy, you kind of hate each other one day, and the rest of the time you're brothers and sisters in arms. And I really like the way you'll see Army and Navy, fight it to the last second in the third overtime, just like mad, trying to knock the other one's head off. And then as soon as the game's over, they're brothers in arms again, because they know that in a year, that guy that was trying to run over him may be flying F-35s or A-10s or whatever, providing close air to support to his unit, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And just the patriotism that surrounds the game, and all the attendees are, it's just different than a normal college football game.
So what years are you at West Point?
82 to 86.
All right. So after 86, you received your commission, earn your commission, I should say. Where are you off to?
I was off to Fort Knox for the Armor Officer Basic course. That was about 6 months. And then I was off to Fort Stewart got married. My high school sweetheart. I'm in what we called at West Point the 2% club. That means you ended up marrying your high school sweetheart, because most people at long distance doesn't make it. And so we got married 9 days after graduation, and then shortly headed off to Fort Knox, there for about 6 months, and then headed to Fort Stewart. I had chosen the 24th Infantry Division. 2 reasons. One, it was part of the Rapid Deployment Force, so it was, with the 82nd and the 101st, so it was HUA, as you know, and also it was only 8.5 hours from where we both grew up, and in Army distance, that's close, compared to Germany, Korea, Vincenza, Italy, or whatever, Fort Hood. It turned out that my unit was going to still have M60A3s when we got there. So I had been through basic for M1s, or officer basic, and we ended up so I had to stay for 3 more weeks to go through a tank commander's course for M60A3s. And which was fine. Just learn the differences on an M60 versus an M1. And
before you go on any further, keep in mind,
sure.
A lot of people might have no understanding what these tanks are all about. Tell us the differences between
Sure.
the two tanks, starting with the older model.
Sure. The M60A3 was kind of an end of one era. It was the most advanced of the M60 series of tank. The M1 improved performance, or M1 IPs, were what we were drawing at Fort Stewart on the transition. And that was the first in the line of M1s that had much greater ability to shoot on the move, ability to, with a fully stabilized gun, so you did not have to stop to fire. You could be moving 30 miles an hour to the east, firing at a target 3,000 meters away, moving any direction, and be just as accurate as sitting still. It was really a game changer. Had the same 105 millimeter cannon, but the stabilization was phenomenal. It also had a thermal imaging system that gave you night vision capabilities far beyond what the M68, even the A3 had. Although the A3 had some night vision capability, it was I believe a light amplification. So if it was a moonless night, there's just not that much light to amplify. And the M1s with the thermal night scopes, it didn't matter how much light there was, as long as the vehicle was giving off heat, which if it's got an engine, it's going to. They were able to see it, and it was just unbelievable. We had tanks in Desert Storm that hit targets well over 4,000 meters away. And some of the Iraqis that were interviewed said they thought they were being engaged by close air support because the version of T-72s that they had purchased from the Russians did not have the latest night vision offering that the Russians had. So they could only see out to about 800 meters to engage at night. And, it wasn't a fair fight. And that's exactly what we want our soldiers in all the time, is an unfair fight.
Yeah. So talk about the Abrams and the crew and your role within that, the weapon system itself.
Okay. I was a platoon leader, and a platoon has 4 of the M1s. And within my tank, I was in the tank commander position, which is on the right side as the vehicle is facing forward in the turret. To my left is the loader, and we both are looking basically at our 180-degree field of view from front all the way to back, looking for threats. And then down in front of me, inside the turret, is the gunner, who's primarily operating the turret and the gun itself. And then in the very front, down in the chassis of the tank, is the driver, who's responsible for navigating the vehicle. As a platoon leader, of course, I'm responsible for deploying my vehicle as well as the other 3. And I am operating on 2 radio networks, my platoon network and also my company network, because I work for a company commander who commands 3 tank platoons in each company.
Gotcha. And I don't remember if you said it yet, but tell us what unit you were in within the 24th ID.
I was in the 2nd Brigade, which was an armor brigade, meaning it had 3 battalions of 3 armor battalions, and I was in the 1st of the 64th Armor. When I first got there, we were 5-32 Armor, and within the first year, maybe even less, we redesignated to 164 Armor, Desert Rogues, which was a regiment that part of the battalions were in Germany and part were in at the 24th.
Gotcha.
Our sister battalion was 4th of the 64th Armor.
So
that was also in 2nd Brigade.
So you got to the 24th ID well before the war kicked off, before Desert.
Oh yeah, I got there in December of '86.
Okay. So what do you remember when you heard about the Iraqis invading Kuwait?
I do.
What was going through your mind?
I think it was August 5th. And, I'm a 26-year-old senior lieutenant. I'm the battalion maintenance officer. And my wife still laughs about this because, I was not a political science major. I was an econ major. I didn't follow world events that close then. And I remember telling her, we're not going to get involved in that. And
How did that work out for you?
yeah, we're alerted just 24 hours later or something to start getting ready. And of course, we had to, we're part of the rapid deployment force, but rapid is different for the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Air Assault, because they are light infantry and they can just load up C-17 aircraft or C-141s, I guess at the time, and they can put boots on the ground. They can be boots up with their ready brigades in 2 hours, I think, and have somebody en route to a part of the world. But we've got heavy equipment, so we started loading rail cars, getting equipment ready to load. And over the course of the next 9 days, we were working 14 to 16-hour days doing training cycles, nuclear, biological, chemical training, because we felt that was a big threat from Saddam Hussein. We were doing just standard crew training. We were getting our vehicles ready to load on the railhead, to haul them up to the port of Savannah and then get them on ship. And that took about 9 days, I believe, 9 or 10 days. And then our vehicles left. And even though they were on Navy, what are called fast sea lift ships, fast is a relative term when you're talking about a ship. I believe they traveled at something like 45 knots, which for a huge ship hauling tanks and Bradleys and trucks is fast, but it's still, 52 miles an hour or something like that. Crossing the ocean, that's a long journey. I think it was about 9 days to get our equipment over. So on the 20, and let me throw in some personal stuff. On the 20th, a week before we were alerted, we had found out my wife was expecting our second child. We had already had our house up on the market because I was planning to get out of the Army in the following spring and wanted to make sure we had time to get the house sold. And I was alerted then on the Wednesday before, I think it was the 23rd of August, I was locked in, wheels up, headed to Saudi Arabia on the Friday, the 25th. My daughter had turned, our daughter we already had turned 2 on the 20th, 2 days before I was locked in. A couple came back for a second look at our house on the 26th, the Saturday after I was wheels up. And, my wife is 24 years old, pregnant, and has a 2-year-old. And we've talked, and she knows what our plan is. So they make an offer. She accepts the offer and sells the house, can't talk to me. And so then the fast sea lift ships take 9 days to get across. And somewhere around we get in country 4 or 5 days, I guess, before the ships get there. And I remember we are literally guiding the first M1 tank in country off the fast sea lift ship. And we're listening to the BBC, and they are reporting that 300 M1 tanks are arrayed across the desert to defend Saudi Arabia from an attack if Saddam Hussein continues pushing through Kuwait. And I'm thinking, you just keep telling him that as we're pulling the first. Maybe they're arrayed across the port in Saudi Arabia, still on ships, but you just keep telling him that. I want him to think they're arrayed across the desert in defensive positions.
So, Rich, before you go any further, tell us a little bit about your first impressions when you got in country. Did you take a civilian aircraft?
We did. We had a chartered, I believe it was American Airlines. It was interesting. The stewardesses were almost a mess. We were fine. We were going to do what we were trained to do. And I don't know if you experienced this, but I remember our crew it was all they could do to not, when we landed and we're about to get off, they were all tearing up. They just couldn't handle, because a lot of our, of the passengers, the Army's a young man's business. So there are a lot of PFCs and Spec 4s that are 20, 21, 22 years old. These are young kids. And the truth is, so was I. I was 26 as a senior lieutenant, and, but I remember stepping out of the airport stepping out of the airplane at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's still brutally hot. It's just, I don't know what time of day it was when you landed, but it was just, because it's late August and it is still just smoking hot. And at that time because we were, just a couple weeks, I guess, or less behind the 82nd and the 101st, and not even all of them, there wasn't any infrastructure in place yet. So they were buying food off the economy. I ended up getting sick off of something, some of I don't know if you had any of the mystery meat on bread that was like a potted meat stuff. Ooh. We all started scraping the meat off and just eating the bread.
So were you staying at the port?
We were for a little while, but as soon as we got our equipment off, they got us out in the desert.
Okay. So you're going out to the desert. Are they putting I'm assuming they're putting your tanks on trucks to get them out there? Is that, or?
I think we used HETs.
Yeah.
To get us out there.
Gotcha.
And that was something that was probably a lesson learned from Desert Shield is the old M60 HETs, were built for like 56-ton tanks. Well, guess what? An M1 fully loaded with ammo is like 68 tons. And when you combine that with 100-degree temperatures and black asphalt, that heats tires up very rapidly. And we had a lot of blown tires. And they were leasing a lot of drivers or HETs or both or whatever. And so it was a challenge for the logisticians because there were a lot of commercial HETs that would break down and you wouldn't, nobody could communicate with the driver because they were a third country national, they'd be Pakistani or something. And we might have an interpreter, but they would be for, a language spoken in Saudi Arabia, not whatever the Pakistani spoke. So yeah, we finally got outside a very, very tiny town of about 500 called Asirah, ASSIRAH. If y'all were anywhere near that,
yes.
You remember that?
Yes.
You remember they had 2 phone lines that could get to an international operator?
I do not remember that.
And what's that?
I don't remember that part, but I do remember the little town.
Yeah. Because I remember we started rotating after we'd been there about a month. The loggies found some place to get sleeping bags dry cleaned because they were getting pretty ripe, and uniforms. And they would rotate, keep one pair and send one pair in, and then sleeping bags started getting rotated. That was nice. And of course, my mechanics, never underestimate the American soldier. My guys, I was fortunate. The mechanics had taken a sump pump out of a 113 personnel carrier. They had taken an immersion heater that the cooks use, put it in a 55-gallon drum, wired up the sump pump, built in some plumbing, and after about 6 weeks, we figured out how to have hot showers.
Nice.
Now, the problem was regulating the temperature, because you might have cool showers, you might have warm shower, hot showers. The only downside was they might be warm, they might be hot, they might be peel your skin hot.
Yeah.
Because it was hard to regulate.
So tell us about the camp you were in. You staying in GP mediums, Bedouin tents? What was your living conditions?
We started off probably the first month. We were just, normal Army bivouac. I was sleeping on the top of my Humvee. And then at some point we got Bedouin tents, the white ones. And we slept in those for probably another month or 2. And then we got the supply system was able to catch up, and we got my maintenance tech, warrant officer, and I shared a GP small before it got really cold. I guess was about the time we got the real tent. Not long before it was time to break it down and move west, which was another adventure.
Yeah. But before we get into that movement, let's talk a little bit about other issues about living conditions. You're married. Were you still married at this time?
I was.
Well, yeah. So you have one on the way, a 2-year-old at home. How are you communicating with your wife?
So she was a saint. She was writing me almost every day. I would write her when I could, probably every few days. And then we started exchanging cassette tapes. I had one of those little like dictation tape recorders, and I would record those and send them. And she would record on the same thing and send back to me. I remember one that just still makes me tear up to this day is she was recording, and our 2-year-old came in and started saying, "Daddy home, Daddy home." And that was tough. And you could hear my wife scrambling to get to the the recorder to turn it off. You know, when our daughter started saying that. And then when we got ready for the big move west, I had to burn all of my uh, um, all of her letters, because, you know, from an OPSEC thing, you guys probably did the same thing. Um, so that was how we communicated. I did get a video or two, and then, you know, you'd get in. I guess the chaplain had set up a tent with a VCR and a TV and a generator, and would rotate through soldiers to let them watch a movie, you know, and I would get after hours time or middle of the day or whatever, and, you know, get my she only did that once or twice, but that was cool, seeing my daughter change so much in 7 months, you know.
Yeah.
At that age.
We're talking about mail. What about any soldier mail? Did you get any of that?
I did. I corresponded with the sweetest lady that was, she was actually in the Huntsville area. I grew up about 45 minutes south of Huntsville, and I come into Redstone Arsenal as an Army brat. And apparently she, through some any soldier thing, got soldiers in the area. And she just started corresponding. The most beautiful, perfect handwriting you have ever seen. I mean, a 3rd grade cursive handwriting teacher. Perfect. It was unbelievable. And that'll matter when I tell you later in the story. That'll matter. And not only was it beautiful in form, and it looked like right out of a handwriting book, it was beautiful as if she were an author. It was pump you up, patriotic. Miss Kelly, I'm trying to remember her first name from 30 something years ago. I think it was Kate, not Katie, but anyway, she was just wonderful. She probably wrote me 10 letters over the period. Beautiful stationery, handwritten, couple-page letters every time, just talking about how proud she was of us and of me for serving. And I would tell her about my soldiers, and she would write back, and just wonderful. My wife and I went to see her when I got back, and Cookie Kelly, that was her name. And she sent, if I remember right, she sent a baby gift when my daughter was born, 5 days after I got back. And we went to see Miss Kelly to meet her. She's in a wheelchair with debilitating arthritis. She's got crooked hands. I don't know how in the world she wrote such perfect cursive handwriting, and how she had such a beautiful, positive outlook on life, you know, given the hand she had been dealt. But just a beautiful human being, a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful lady. And she was writing others. She wasn't just writing me. I think she had said she had about a dozen that she was writing like that. And it was just very heartwarming. All the any soldier mail, I made sure I gave to my soldiers that didn't have somebody writing them regularly. But that one, she had addressed specifically to me that she'd gotten my name from somewhere. I don't remember where, but yeah, that was very touching, very, very touching.
You think that program helped with the morale of the troops?
Oh, absolutely. It just broke my heart. I had soldiers that were getting nothing, parents, siblings, nothing. And, I just shook my head going, what? It doesn't matter whether the politics of any given war. You think this is a war for oil? You think we're over here for oil? So what? Your son is in the desert. He's doing what his country asked of him. He's not making policy decisions. He's a specialist. I've finally gotten over saying Spec 4. I'm showing my age when I say Spec 4. He saluted the flag. He did the oath, and he's doing what he's told. He doesn't get to decide, I'm going to sit this one out. This isn't, I don't think this is a good reason for being here, so I'm going to pass, First Sergeant. You can imagine how that conversation will go. So yeah, I think it was very impactful. I know it was with me personally. I was just blown away by Miss Kelly's kindness and patriotism and her dedication to write a dozen soldiers, 2-page letters like that on a regular basis.
So you alluded to the division moving west. Can you talk a little bit as to why 24th ID was required
Sure.
to head west, and why it was sensitive that was done as covertly as possible?
Yeah, we were going to be part of the big left hook to cut off the Republican Guard's escape from Kuwait if they tried to do a last minute. We wanted to hit the Republican Guard hard to remove Saddam Hussein's ability to do this in the future, and to it was kind of there was a feint directly into Kuwait to try to hold them in place, and we were part of the big, what was called the left hook that General Schwarzkopf talked about. And we wanted to be as discreet as possible about it because we didn't want Iraqi troops to reposition. It was funny, we had moved to a staging position after or let me back up. The 2 days before we were planning to move, PFC in my unit comes and wakes me up at 3:30 in the morning. Hey, sir, the air war has started. And he wasn't the sharpest troop I had. And I was really suspicious that he was confusing some of the traffic, that maybe it was just a skirmish. Maybe it was just a feint or something. But I get up and I go listen to the radio, and sure enough, we've lit the fuse, and this was just shortly after Secretary Baker had said, unfortunately, or wait, let me get to that. That's actually later. So anyway, 48 hours later, we start our move west, but we're in the assembly area to make that move. And, we put out our chemical detectors for chemical biological attack. You're familiar with those. Me and my driver are asleep in our Humvee. It's middle of the night. Bam, 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 bam. Gas, 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 gas. The guy is already in his mask and his gloves, which tells me, and we were already wearing, our MOP suits, MOP 2, which tells me the alarm went off a while ago, which tells me we could be in really bad trouble. So we're getting our mask on as quick as we can. And my driver's, his hands are doing this. He's like, sir, isn't nerve agent symptoms or, shaking hands and rapid heart rate? And I said, yeah, it is. It's also symptoms of being scared shitless. So let's calm down a little bit. And of course, I'm thinking, you're right. If that guy already had time to put his gloves on, because you don't put your gloves on right away. We could be in a world of hurt, but I'm not ready to hit an EpiPen yet, because that creates its own set of problems if you don't need it, and then another one goes off, but they end up deciding they were both false alarms. And, after a couple hours of significant stress, it's all decided it was, sand or something that wasn't legit. But then we start the move, and it was, if I remember right, a couple 100 kilometers west. And again, even though it was cooler, you're still driving that far with vehicles that are overweighing the HETs, heavy equipment transport. It's still rough on the vehicles. A lot of blown out tires. Had to move vehicle and move tanks to other. The Bradleys were generally fine because they don't weigh nearly as much. But we finally got out there, and I actually talked to my wife about 48 hours, I think, before we LD'd. And when I got home, she remembered that, and she hits me and hits me on the shoulders like, you knew when I talked to you the last time that you were about to launch into Iraq, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, I did. You didn't say anything. I said, no, I didn't. You didn't have a need to know. You didn't need to worry. And the line was probably monitored, and it would have gone dead if I had did anything. So no, yeah, I knew, and I didn't. No, I'm not going to tell you. It's like, that's part of my job. It's like, well, you seem so calm. It was like, this is what we were trained to do. And by that point, we were all, and I don't know if your unit was the same way, but we were all so frustrated. It's like, look, home is through Iraq. So let's get started. Let's light the fuse and get this over with. And I remember shortly before we LD'd, there was, I believe that's when Secretary of State Baker said, and it may have been before the air war started, is where him and Tariq Aziz, his Iraqi counterpart, had a big negotiation session, and we thought we might get them to pull out, and then Baker did, and his first two words told you that no, not going to happen. Because I think it was, unfortunately, if I remember right, was the first word out of his mouth. Unfortunately, we were not able. It was like, okay, suit up, let's get ready to go. Because the only way home is through Iraq.
Rich, one of the things that I've seen personally is that the younger generation looks back at Desert Storm and they think they have the benefit in hindsight, and they understand. They look in the history books and see that it was a very quick war. But when you're boots on the ground, prior to the ground war, there was a lot of uncertainty. Iraq had combat experience, whereas the majority of U.S. troops did not. We had new equipment such as the M1 Abram that we were pretty confident about, but had never been battle tested to the degree that we were looking at. Can you put somebody into the mindset of the U.S. soldier? Oh, and the chemical weapons. Can you put somebody in the mindset of the U.S. soldier about the doubts not doubts, but the concerns of a typical U.S. soldier
Yeah,
at the time
yeah,
going up against a huge army like Iraq.
sure. Iran and Iraq had fought for, I believe, 8 years, the Iran-Iraq War. So Iraq had a battle-hardened army. They had hundreds of thousands of soldiers that were multi-year combat veterans. And, we had not been, with the exception of the invasion of Panama, which was a very small excursion, we had not been in combat since we got out of Vietnam in 73, something like that. And we just knew, we were told to expect chemical weapons. That's why we were in MOP 2 the entire time. And for those, that's multiple oriented protective posture or something like that. It's basically pajamas made of charcoal is what they kind of look like, pajamas. It's long sleeve shirt and bottoms that go over your regular clothes that are filled with charcoal, about a 1/4 inch thick of charcoal to filter the chemical weapons. And as you might think, in a climate like Iraq, they're extremely hot. But we had trained a lot with expecting chemical weapons, and we were expecting this battle-hardened army. And to be honest, the Iraq army we ran into was two different armies. There was the conscript army, the people that were forced to be there and were not well trained. That's when we launched into Iraq on the 24th of February, 91, in the ground war. The first resistance we came to were conscripts, draftees, in other words. And they were not well armed. They were not well trained. A lot of them were looking to surrender. That's a very different army than when we got further into Iraq and came up against the Republican Guard units. They were very well armed. They were very well trained. They knew what they were doing. I think those were the career soldiers. And that was a very different contest. Thankfully, in our case, the M1 tanks proved as decisive as the makers had thought they would. There were instances of 4,000 plus meter shots successfully taken. There were instances where an entire Iraqi company or whatever is taken out without losing a single Abrams tank. My battalion lost no tanks, lost 2 Bradleys, and the Bradleys were unfortunately to friendly fire. And as horrible as that is, in the fog of war, we continue to work on ways to prevent that from happening. But when you have hundreds of armored vehicles on a smoky, dark, chaotic battlefield, they're never acceptable, but it's going to happen. We want to make it as small as we can, but it's sometimes going to happen. We lost both of those at the battle for Jalaba airfield. John Hutto was a PFC, and Andy Alanez was a specialist in the same Bradley. The Bradley was from 319 infantry that had cross attached to us. And there was another Bradley that was shot also. I think they were in the same Bradley. They may have been two. We had two shot. 16 soldiers were wounded. I think 15 lost a limb or more, all from enemy fire. I mean, from friendly fire. But a Bradley looks a lot like a BMP under thermal sights. Especially there was artillery coming in on the Jalaba Airport. There was vehicles everywhere. There was smoke from that they were trying to obscure what we could see. It was still awful. There was a picture in Newsweek of the inside of a Black Hawk evacuating some wounded with a body bag, and one of those was Andy Allenez, the soldier that's sitting there with a bandage on. Not Andy. I think Andy is in the bag, and it's one of his buddies that just found out that it was Andy in the bag.
I was going to ask you about that. That's the one with the sergeant. That just learns it's his friend in the. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a powerful photograph.
Yeah, very powerful. It reminds us all that, it may have been 100-hour war, but there are 425 families that don't have their loved one anymore.
So, Rich, again, keeping in mind that a lot of people watching this have never either been in the military or in a combat zone. A lot of people think that ground wars occur kind of like at Normandy, where the minute you touch enemy soil, you have contact with the enemy. That wasn't the case in Desert Storm, at least on the left hook. Tell us how long it took for you to make contact with the enemy.
We probably went, if I remember right, we probably went 5 or 6 hours before a shot was fired. And then it was just sporadic. It was sporadic, an outpost here and there. And we eliminated those threats, I think, with mortars. And then it got progressively thicker, but it's abject. It's a lot of boredom punctuated with abject terror. Most of the time you're driving along looking for a conflict. You're looking at every rock, every rise, every dip, looking for where is that guy hidden, because defenders are trying to hide, get as much of their vehicle hidden as they can, where just their sights and their gun is exposed so that they can see you. And so you're in a heightened state all the time looking for those. But most of the time you're just that, you're looking. And then in an instant, or like when we were getting ready to take Jalava Airfield, that was, and thankfully we did have the element of surprise. They did not realize we were there. There were still aircraft on the runway. It's pretty cool when an infantry division or in this case, 2nd Brigade, gets, I think 6 aircraft kills or something. It's not often a armor brigade gets to take out aircraft, but on the runway, that's a good way to take them out.
So your platoon, and in particular, your tank was actively involved in these battles.
Now, I was a battalion maintenance officer, so I was in the middle between 3 tank companies while we were moving through the desert. I was making sure the battalion commander had all his vehicles to stay in the fight.
So you're not in a tank, or are you in a tank?
No, I was not. I was not by then. By
Okay.
then, I was the battalion maintenance officer. Yeah.
So you traveling by?
I was in a 113 for the actual fight.
Gotcha. So explain what a 113 is to people who are not aware what a 113 is.
Yeah, it is a box with tracks on it. It's got a 50 caliber machine gun on the top. It is an armored personnel carrier before the Bradley fighting vehicle came out. Whereas a Bradley fighting vehicle, as the name implies, it's a lot more of a fighting vehicle, whereas the 113 was just a troop hauler. I mean, you've got your 50 cal, but it's only, on a pivot. It's only as good as you can do this. And if you're in a fight with something that's stabilized and you're doing this, you're in a world of hurt. So it was really just armored transportation, for me, for the most part.
So what are your duties during this 100 hours? What are your duties and responsibilities?
Yeah, I am coordinating all of the maintenance effort. Like anytime we lost a vehicle to maintenance or enemy fire, I was coordinating the teams that are going to get that vehicle back in the fight. Like we had a vehicle that we had replaced the engine just hours before heading into Iraq that died 2 hours into Iraq. Something about the rebuild of the engine was bad. So we had to, the unit keeps moving, the battalion keeps moving. We have to replace the engine, there in the middle of the desert and get it back and caught up with its company. Amazingly enough, it only takes about 45 minutes to replace an engine on an M1. And I bet it didn't take that much time on that one because adrenaline was pumping pretty high when you're in a foreign country and we've got bad guys potentially around us. Mm-hmm. And then I would have to go, because mechanics aren't generally trained to navigate. I would generally have to lead these teams back to, if we lost a vehicle, or at one point our support platoon got lost, and our support platoon leader got lost, and he had 6 HEMTTs with diesel fuel with him, and our battalion was stopped for want of fuel, and so I had to go find him and get him back to the battalion. It's not a BMO job, but I was behind the battalion where I had recovered a vehicle, and I was closer and I could navigate. So it just came to me, and we broke every rule in the book, because at some point, how you get out of radio range? I was just in the range where I could hear him on FM, which I think is around 25 kilometers. And so I said, okay, and it was night. And I said, all right, I want you to hit a white star cluster. And I'm going to see if I can see you. Said, stop, don't move. You got 6 HEMTTs. Let me run around with my 113. It's a little more mobile than you are hauling 6 trucks. And so he shot it, nothing. I drove about 10 clicks, what I was hoping was his direction. All right, hit the second one. Because, he's exposing himself when he does that.
Yeah.
Because bad guys could see it and go, oh, I wonder what that is. And thankfully, the second one I saw and then made a beeline to him, got him back up to the battalion, because the battalion commander is about fit to be tied.
I bet.
That, they're sitting there idling with tanks running out of fuel, and he can't move because he's got no fuel, and his support platoon is lost.
Did you guys,
But,
land navigation in the desert's a different animal. Did you guys have any, I know a handful of GPS units landed right before the attack. Did you guys have any GPS?
We got 2 GPSs, like you said, right before we LD'd. The battalion commander got one, and the scout platoon leader got one. And then we bought off the economy 9 Lorans. I don't know if y'all had any of those, but it's really made for like maritime navigation, because I think it'll get you within 200, 300 yards, and on the ocean, that's fine. And to be honest, in the desert, it's pretty good. And knowing that I had been lost plenty of times at NTC, the National Training Center out in the Mojave Desert, I know how hard it is to navigate in the desert. I was trained at West Point, where the mountains are like this, and reading a map is a cakewalk. And then I went out to the NTC, and it's flat. I'm like, holy moly, it's just a different animal. And Saudi's even an order of magnitude harder. And so as soon as I got my Loran, I'm reading the book. I'm learning how this thing works. I'm going to figure it out, even though we got it like a day before we crossed the berm into Iraq. So I figured out how to use it. Back to our support platoon leader getting lost story. He didn't. He just kind of skimmed over it. I think I got it. And then he didn't know how to use it, and he ended up lost because we didn't have the ones. Apparently they could put another chip in it or something, and it would convert from lat long to grid coordinates. Well, we didn't have the one that had that chip, so it would only give you lat long, and you'd have to convert it. And so I made sure I learned how to do that before I'm in bad guy country, so that I could get around, because I didn't want to be lost, especially sure enough, it ended up happening. If I had to go 60 clicks back to pick up a vehicle that had been repaired with, nothing but my 50 cal, I didn't want to be lost, because there's still going to be, there's still the risk of stragglers running around with bigger weapons than I got.
Yeah.
So it worked out well. They were good enough for out in the desert.
So do you remember when you heard that the ground war was in a ceasefire operation?
I remember we heard a ceasefire was coming, and it was after we got to the outskirts of Basra. And by then we had some real battles with Republican Guard units, and they were, much more formidable than we had. Folks just looking to surrender when we got into the first ones. And in fact, our battalion had about 300 maybe surrender, and we put a big thing of barbed wire around them. And for a while we had some guards, and then the battalion commander was like, what do we do? We don't have, was asking brigade, what do we do with these people? We don't have, because we gave them water and gave them MREs, and they're just sitting there eating and drinking, and they're just happy. They're not getting shot at. And they said, just leave them. Just leave them there. And somebody from the battalion went back by 4 hours later after the one vehicle that had been guarding the gate. I mean, just the cutout in the concertina wire. 4 hours after that vehicle left, somebody went back by, headed to the support battalion, said they're all just still sitting there drinking their water and eating their MREs. They're not getting shot at. They got water and food. They're happy. They're not going anywhere. But we got word that it was coming. I think it was at night or late in the afternoon. And then all of the field artillery pulls up close and they are just cutting loose. They are kind of a mad minute. MLRS, 155s, 8-inch, all of it is just going to town in preparation for a ceasefire. In other words, they're gonna use all they've got to inflict as much damage as they can before the ceasefire is on.
Was this near Highway 8?
I believe so. Yeah.
Gotcha. So was your unit involved with I always say the name wrong, the Battle of Remoyle oil fields?
We were not. That was 464.
Gotcha. So at some point, 24th turns south and heads back into Saudi Arabia. Were you at Khobar Towers? And if so, tell us what that was all about.
I was not at Khobar Towers. I heard about it.
Okay. So where'd you go then?
We went, I thought we went straight to the port.
Gotcha.
And we started cleaning vehicles like crazy, turning in ammo and cleaning vehicles like crazy to get them ready to go back on the fast sea lift ships. We were sleeping in like warehouses with cots at the port, getting ready to go back. I remember thinking, man, I bet the 101st and the 82nd are ticked because they were wheels up, in country 10, 14 days before us. And then President Bush goes on TV and says, the war's over and elements of the 24th Infantry Division will be, lead elements will be heading home soon. And, and of course, my pregnant wife is thrilled. And she thinks, if there's an advance party, she hears through the wives network that there's going to be a rear detachment or whatever. She hears that there's going to be a captain. And by then I've been promoted to captain. And she thinks, I'm 9 months pregnant. I bet it'll be Richard. And, I'm like, well, I'm the BMO. No, it won't be Richard. And it ends up, it was a good friend who had voluntarily gone with us, a guy by the name of Mark Such. He had left like 2 days before we were alerted to go to Benning to the infantry advance course. And when the balloon went up, when we got the call, he tells his wife, I've got to go back to Fort Stewart because of this. He didn't tell her, I've got to go back. He let her believe the Army was telling him he's got to go back. But it was my heart, I got to go back and deploy with my guys. So he comes back, begs the battalion commander to let him go. Somehow it happens. And then 3 or 4 months later, he admits, honey, when I said I have to go back? Well, that wasn't the Army telling me. So he was the first one back, rightly so.
And the first one divorced.
No, they're still married.
So tell us about the homecoming.
It was, of course we get back, we fly back into Savannah. Our dear friends there meet me at the parade field at Fort Stewart because Annette has moved home because she's thinking that I'm not going to be home in time when this baby's born, and she's going to have a 2-year-old and a newborn, and she's going to need some help. So she moves home to this area with her folks, and the doctor's telling her, you don't need to travel because you're 9 months pregnant. She's like standing in the door ready to have a baby, and she ignores them, and her parents drive her to Atlanta to family to meet me. And our friends meet us at and their kids meet us, signs and the whole bit at the parade field. And then they take me to the airport in Atlanta to get a rental car. And I think I'm fine. I'm not sleepy. I got so much adrenaline. I'm going to drive to Atlanta, no problem. And I take off to Atlanta to meet her. And twice I wake up, with all 4 tires in the median in the grass. And I stop and run circles around the car and do push-ups, try to wake myself up, and, drive with the windows down and everything else to stay awake. And finally, thankfully, I make it safely to Atlanta and reunite with my wife and the 2-year-old, who's a little standoffish because, she just remembers Dad really from pictures, and but it was good. It was fantastic to be home.
Mm-hmm. So I got a couple more questions, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Okay.
So if you ran into a young kid, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, and he's like, hey, I heard you were in the service, I'm thinking about enlisting or becoming commissioned, what advice would you give them on how to be successful in the U.S. Army or any branch for that matter?
How to be successful. Give it 100%. Always be humble. Especially, I'm probably best equipped to give advice to guys that are being commissioned, is listen to those NCOs. Don't think for a second that you know more than them, especially if you're going a branch where you'll be a platoon leader. That platoon sergeant's been in the Army doing that work for 12 or 14 years. He can make you or break you. And if you treat them that way, pretty quickly, you'll go from being that platoon leader to being my platoon leader or my lieutenant, and they'll do anything in the world for you to make you successful. If you come in like a jerk who knows everything or thinks you do because you got a whopping 6 months of OBC under your belt, or a ring knocker that went to a service academy, they can ruin you. Most of them absolutely want you to succeed, but it's a lot of it is based on how you approach them. And I tell any young adult thinking about it that it's a great experience. You'll mature a lot, whether you deploy or not. It's a great experience, especially if you don't know what you want to do when you grow up. It's a great opportunity to grow up, and you can never go wrong serving your country.
All right, here's another one. Roll your sleeves up for this one.
All right.
So we'll talk a little bit offline after the interview, but you'll receive a copy of the video, and you'll also get instructions on how to submit your story to the Library of Congress through the Veterans History Project. So theoretically, as long as we still have a United States government standing 100, 200 years from now, one of your great grandkids might stumble upon this video. What would you want them to know about your service to your country?
It was the most fulfilling, highest honor I've had in my life up to the 58-year mark. And I wouldn't change a thing. Deployment and all. It was a fantastic experience, and it was my honor to serve.
Well said. Is there anything else that that you wanted to capture before we stop the tape?
I don't believe so.
All right, Hank.
I appreciate the opportunity.
On behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, I thank you for taking the time, and more importantly, thank you for your service. And if